Hello, welcome to Glasgow Rangers Nation with me, your host Owen James, the channel that brings you all your latest Rangers news, guys. We are, thank God, fast approaching the end of the season. Yes, just one game remains. 12:30 kickoff on Saturday at Easter Road against Hibernian, and then that is it. Season is done and dusted. And I've got to say, I cannot wait for this season to be over. And you know what? Just to get on with it, it's been a shit season, an appalling season. No trophies won. They've moved ahead of us in terms of trophies won. It's just not great. Not great at all. And we've got to kind of hopefully look for more positive times ahead under our new manager, whoever that is going to be, or head coach, I think is the actual correct term. And we'll talk some more of the latest on the Davide Ancelotti story. Obviously, Rangers coming off the back of a victory over Dundee United, a 3-1 victory in the final game at Ibrox. Outstanding performances by Hyefte and Nicholas Raskin in that game. Raskin is certainly someone who, according to reports, Rangers are anxious to offer a new deal to after just outstanding display after outstanding display. However, according to reports in the media down here in England, Aston Villa and Leeds United are both interested in securing the services of the Belgian to play in the EPL next season. Now, Raskin has made no secret of his desire to play in the English Premier League one day. Now, whether or not he is willing to wait another season and then obviously look for an even bigger club than Villa and Leeds, who knows? Who knows? Obviously he spoke once, didn't he, about his desire to become a Chelsea player. I suppose you've got to kind of argue Chelsea, Villa, who's bigger? I suppose down here in England we would consider Aston Villa a bigger club than Chelsea. But look, the situation is what it is in terms of Raskin. Raskin was, again, I think, one of the finest players on the pitch the other night, Wednesday night, in our final home game, and, has proved time after time, what a talented player he is. And look, I would certainly hope that if he's here next season that he is the new captain of Rangers. I highly doubt it, but I would love him to be the new captain of Rangers. I think he would be a phenomenal captain, and certainly in that short spell that he had as captain of the club, he was outstanding. So look, I think overall, look, we've come off the back, final home game, 3-1 victory. A game that was good in spells and dreadful in spells, and just sort of summed up Rangers' season, really. Maybe Barry Ferguson's last game at home. You never know. It could be, could not be. Depends, obviously, on what happens with the new manager search. In that game, a few of the standout points. Jack Butland was back in goal, pulled off some very good saves. Good to see Jack Butland back. I think he's a lot better keeper than Liam Kelly. I think there is perhaps some of the element of putting him in the shop window to hope that he plays well these last couple of games, and someone from down south obviously puts a bit of money forward for Butland and his services. I think that is definitely the desire perhaps of the club at this moment in time. I thought Tav was absolutely dreadful on Wednesday night. I think hopefully that's his last ever game. Perhaps he'll get a testimonial, but his last ever competitive game at home, I doubt it. I think he'll get a new deal. I think he'll be back for at least the next 2 seasons, unfortunately. But there we go. That is what it is. It was a 3-1 victory. That's the main thing. Raskin scored, which is good to see him getting in the goals. Something, obviously, that if he stays next season, we hope that he does well. Right, let's turn to this new manager search, shall we? Look, Davide Ancelotti. According to reports in several media outlets up in Scotland, apparently positive talks have taken place between Davide Ancelotti and Rangers, and Ancelotti is, according to reports, very anxious to take charge at Rangers and sees Rangers as a good project for him, his first ever project. It's an interesting one. Look, I've heard arguments and counter arguments for this guy. The counter arguments certainly seem to be based around the fact that that he has no managerial experience, that he has very much followed in his father's footsteps and benefited from having a father who is Carlo Ancelotti, probably the greatest manager in world football at this moment in time. Look, I think, to be honest with you, if this guy's half as successful as his dad, he will be a phenomenal manager. People talk about that, lack of a track record, but I just want to pull out a couple of points here. Pre-Rangers, where had Graham Souness managed before? Because he came straight, I think he was from Sampdoria at the time, to be player manager at Rangers. He had no managerial experience. And certainly he had to kind of rebuild a squad and to bring in players and to develop a squad. Yes, he would have had a lot more money and a lot more backing than Ancelotti will get. It just seemed really weird to be talking about Ancelotti and Rangers in the same breath. I mean, I know it's not Carlo, but still. Walter Smith had only been an assistant before he took the Rangers job. I think probably the two of I'm not saying that I mean, Walter Smith is the greatest Rangers manager of all time. I don't think there's any argument about that. But Graham Souness and Walter Smith, two of the greatest Rangers managers of all time, came to this job having had zero managerial experience. So I do think that this argument that that he has to have managerial experience, he has to have managerial experience in Scotland, is utter pish. It's rubbish. It is absolute rubbish. He does not need that at all. And I think Graham Souness proved that. Walter Smith proved that. Steven Gerrard had no managerial experience before taking the Rangers job. So, I think that is a very weak argument, to be honest with you. I think, personally believe that if you are talented enough, and if you are good enough, then it doesn't really matter your background, as long as you can come in and you can do a very, very good job. And look, Ancelotti has worked at some of the biggest clubs in Europe. Yes, okay, Everton perhaps not one of them, but he has worked at Bayern Munich. He has worked at PSG. He has worked at Real Madrid, the biggest club in world football. And has had phenomenal success during his time there. And like I said, has also worked very closely with his dad, learned from his dad, who is, like I said, one of the greatest managers of all time. Now, one piece of news that was talked about in the media this week was the situation surrounding his possible assistant. Now, people have talked about keeping Barry Ferguson on his assistant. I don't think there is any go in that at all. Barry, is not, I don't think, somebody who will take a back seat. He's not going to be willing to become an assistant. He's kind of made it clear, hasn't he, that he wants the job on a permanent basis. And I think if he isn't given that job on a permanent basis, he's not going to settle for second best. He's not going to take the booby prize, as he have been an assistant. And certainly it seems very much that Davide Ancelotti has already got in mind an assistant manager anyway, somebody he wants to bring with him from Real Madrid. So, and I think that's one thing you've got to do. I think if you're going to take on a new manager, which, we seem to be going to be doing in bringing in Davide Ancelotti, then you've got to be willing to give that man his chance to bring in his stats, to bring his staff, to bring in his own staff, not be reliant on bringing in or, being given a staff or being told that he has to have manager X, manager Y, manager Z to come in and support him. That isn't the thing. Now, just putting up on screen now, this is the man that has been kind of reported as being his prospective number two, someone he has worked very closely with at Real Madrid and at Everton and at Napoli and at Bayern Munich and at Paris Saint-Germain. So this is Francesco Mauri, the 36-year-old Italian coach. He was the rehab coach at Paris Saint-Germain, so obviously they worked very closely with Davide Ancelotti when he was a fitness coach at Paris, was with Madrid separately to Ancelotti, then was with Bayern Munich, Napoli, Everton, and then now is the athletic coach at Real Madrid. And it's thought that Davide Ancelotti, if appointed as Rangers manager, would want to bring in Francesco Mauri as his assistant manager. So this is, again, another young, talented, up-and-coming coach, someone who, again, very much fits this model that Rangers seem to be going for, bringing in these young, exciting talents, not only on the field, but also in the managerial hot seat to kind of try and drive the club to the next level. And again, I think, you look at it in terms of the fact that this is a guy that Ancelotti has worked with. This is a guy that Ancelotti has built up a trust with, an understanding with. And as I said, I think, to be honest with you, if you're going to get the best out of a manager, out of a head coach, whatever you wish to call that person, you give that person every possible opportunity to succeed. And for me, that means that you give them the right to select their own staff, to bring in their people that they want to work with. You don't, like I say you must have 3 Scottish people and they all must be ex-Rangers, because to me that is not the right way forward. You are automatically putting into place someone they've then got to try and build a working relationship with, someone they've never perhaps previously had a working relationship with, whereas allowing them to bring in people they've worked with previously, people they're used to working with, people they've got understanding with, it enables them to hit the ground running from day one. It certainly appears with Francesco Mauri that this is certainly someone that Ancelotti trusts. Guys, I'd love to know your thoughts on that. What do you think of that? Do you think that Francesco Mauri would be a good appointment as an assistant manager? I certainly do. I think he's certainly in with that kind of the Davide Ancelotti kind of sort of area. Now, look, it is such a fascinating time. I think there was a lot of panic, wasn't there, around who would be the new manager. Initially, I think a lot of Rangers fans wanted Barry Ferguson to succeed and become manager, which is understandable. The guy's, a Rangers legend. He's captained Rangers to phenomenal success. He was a fantastic player when he played for the club. And he certainly has the passion and the heart for the club. It's been proven over time that he's not a very good coach and he's not a very good manager, but he is obviously got that. But this is a time when we seem to be working at bringing in the best possible head coach, someone who can coach and develop the team, move the team forward, get the team to progress, and that's what it's about. The days of rah rah rah, shout shout shout, which is what Barry Ferguson seems to use as an approach, are done. They are over. It is now a very technical game where you have to have a manager stroke head coach who has a technical expertise to vary tactics, to vary approaches, to come up with strategies to unlock different types of team and unlock different types of defence, whether that be low block, mid block, counter attack, high press, low press, whatever sort of style that opposition teams use. You have to have that expertise, and certainly it seems that Davide Ancelotti has certainly got all those skills in his tool bag. So look, this is where we're up to now, and like I said, it is seeming to be a 2-week timeline that we're looking at, because apparently, apparently about it, Real Madrid have 10 days left of their season. So, it's thought that within the next 10 days, an announcement could be made at the club. The season obviously will be over at that point for Rangers as well. So you're not undermining anybody by appointing a new head coach. You're giving him an opportunity to start to, look at things, to get involved with the club. I think obviously Ancelotti will have his ideas, on everything, and he'll want to bring those in and develop those within the club. And I'm sure that he will get that backing. Now, one thing that we do know is that the managerial search that has sort of seemingly landed on Ancelotti as a manager has been led by Greta Steinsson and backed up by Kevin Thelwell. So the two of them, the sporting director of Leeds and seemingly of the 49ers group, Greta Steinsson, backed by Kevin Thelwell, has found Davide Ancelotti and has obviously decided that this is the best guy going forward. Look, I think it's an exciting appointment. That's the big thing. And I think one of the big things we needed to kind of bring in this summer was an exciting appointment. Someone who could, turn heads, someone who could shake things up a little bit. And I certainly think that Davide Ancelotti and his staff will be able to do that. And I think, as fans, we need to get behind Ancelotti. We need to give him his backing. I think he will look at the present squad, get rid of the dead wood from that present squad. I think, this is a guy who has worked with some of the best players in world football. He knows what makes a good footballer. As I said the day before's video, this guy's worked with Jude Bellingham, Vinny Jr. He's worked with Dani Carvajal. He's worked with Luka Modric, Toni Kroos, Camavinga. He's worked with some fantastic footballers, some absolute superstar footballers, and knows what makes a good footballer. And certainly we'll look at some of our players and go, oh my God, does he think he's a footballer? Which I think will be very, very interesting for him indeed when he first sets foot in the training ground and certainly sets foot for the first time in Ibrox. Guys, let me know your thoughts on this probable appointment. I think, it's looking good. I mean, the only other move for him seemed to be to Como in Italy, his native Italy. But Cesc Fabregas, yes, the very same Cesc Fabregas, ex-Barcelona, ex-Manchester United, ex-Arsenal, has decided he will stay at Como instead of going to Bayer Leverkusen, which seemed to be the talk once, obviously, Bayer Leverkusen announced that Xabi Alonso was headed to take over the Madrid job. So, that out of the way, it looks like there's a good chance that these positive talks could lead to a positive development in the very near future. Thank you for watching Glasgow Rangers Nation, guys. If you've enjoyed the content, please like, comment, share and subscribe. And remember always, please never forget, we are the people.